Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone. This is Lori Smith on Blog Talk Radio. Good morning. It's 7 o'clock here in the morning, Calgary, Alberta time, June 27th. And this is Child Abuse Prevention and Human Rights Abuse Prevention is Up to Us. 30-minute live internet streaming radio broadcast from blogtalkradio.com. I'm just waking up, having some coffee, and trying to wake up here Sunday morning. And it's a beautiful morning, and I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to be able to do these shows. I missed my show yesterday morning as I slept in, so I apologize about that. And Friday night, my show, I didn't get to my show because I was on Dreamcatchers Talk Radio, and we were on for an extended time, so we extended the show for another hour, so I missed my show Friday night as well. So I wanted to make sure and be here for today, and I wanted to talk about the male survivors of child sexual abuse and, victims, because men, are victims of and survivors of child abuse as well as women. So it's just that men a lot of times don't reach out for many reasons. And so I wanted to cover this topic. It's very important. I have covered it before, and we're going to talk about it some more. And on Monday night, Dreamcatchers Talk Radio here on Blog Talk Radio at www.blogtalkradio.com/Dreamcatchers at 10 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we have a guest coming on, and his name is Arnie Alberts, and that's A-R-N-Y, and Alberts, A-L-B-E-R-T-S. And he's a male survivor of child sexual abuse. And he has a book, and he's written a book. It's an awesome book. It's called Burnt Cookies, A Quest for Closure. And he also has a website, and I'll give you that information as well later on. But I've read his book, and I'm telling you, this guy, he survived, and he is a true survivor, like so many other people and so many other men, had survived child sexual abuse. And it was not at the hands of his parents, but it was at the hands of another person who groomed him. And so, I hope that you will join us on Monday night, tomorrow night, Dreamcatchers Talk Radio. Elizabeth Roberts-Brawley and myself are going to be doing an interview with Arnie Alberts and talking about his whole experience and how he survived and how he's managed to make it and to be able to help other people, especially men, to get some help, right, if they've been abused sexually as a child or as a young person. So hopefully you will tune into that on Monday night, tomorrow night. But today I wanted to talk about it because it's so important. And, there's not very many, seems to me like more women are more apt to reach out when it comes to survivor issues, adult survivor issues of child abuse. So even if a male was not a victim of child sexual abuse, but if a male was a victim of even physical abuse or verbal abuse, psychological abuse, a lot of times they will not reach out because they just feel like, society has portrayed men and the male persona as being the strong one, the one who doesn't have these kinds of problems and just doesn't have any problems at all and should just be able to handle everything. And why would anything bother a man, you know what I mean? Which is just a false perception society has put on and sort of labeled men as, being able to cope with everything and that they should be able to take anything that happens to them and just let it roll off their shoulders, no problem. And that's just not true because men have feelings too. Men are hurt just like women, and men are taken advantage of and used just like women, and men are abused in domestic violence situations as well, and also abused as children. 1 in 6 boys, according to Jim Hopper, PhD, that's what we're going to be reading from, 1 in 6 boys is sexually abused before the age of 16, and these are pretty much the stats across the board for North America. And it's fact, 1 in 6 boys will experience unwanted sexual touching or molestation or sexual abuse before the age of 16, and 1 in 3 girls. So that's the stats. But 1 in 6 boys, it's just terrible. And the thing is is there really enough outreach to the male survivor of any kind of abuse? Women tend to be more apt to talk about things and will quite often share with their friends and girlfriends what happened to them, and men just won't. And because of the shame and the guilt and the fact that they feel like, well, I should have been able to stop it, because men have the this perception of themselves as when they were younger even, that they should have been able to handle it or to stop it. And so that's just not the case, and we know. So that's why I'm so glad to be able to do these shows. And I'm not a professional counselor. I don't hold any counseling certificates or anything like that. I'm just a private citizen who pays to do my own blog talk show to talk about child abuse prevention and human rights abuse prevention. I really like to be another voice out there for people, just to say that we have to stop child abuse, and to sort of help people to see that they're not alone, and survivors of child abuse, and just to see that there is help out there, and that to keep reaching out and keep getting, looking for that help and that hope wherever you can find it. So that's why I do these shows. I'm not a professional. Listen at your own discretion. I cover every topic regarding abuse of all types. So the topics can be very sensitive, and if you think the topic will bother you, then you have to turn the show off and listen at your own discretion, please. And if you're a young person under the age of 18, I just ask that you have someone tune in with you to my shows to see if it's something that you should be listening to. And make sure that you stay safe online, as there are so many child sexual predators and pedophiles out there trying to get a hold of children, and they will do just about anything they can to do that. As is a good example here for Arnie Alberts, who's going to be a guest on Dreamcatchers Talk Radio. He was groomed, he was taken advantage of and exploited, and the abuse affected his whole entire life. And so, you don't want that to happen to you. So make sure that you keep yourself safe online. If you're a young person under the age of 18, have someone know what you're doing online, and be very cautious about what you do. Get the information before you start going onto chat rooms on how to stay safe in chat rooms and how to stay safe online, because a lot of people in chat rooms are not children. They are, in fact, child sexual predators pretending to be children, young people, right? They're pretending to be teenagers. And so you wouldn't even know it, because they know all the music, they know all the stuff that young people like, and they hang around these chat rooms trying to get a hold of children. So make sure that you keep yourself safe and get the information on how to stay safe online. You'll be doing yourself a favor and myself a favor as well. So we're going to continue on with this topic, and I'm reading from an article that I pulled up off of Jim Hopper's website. And Jim Hopper, he's a PhD, and he's a psychologist. He's a researcher and a therapist for men and women subjected to unwanted sexual experiences and other forms of abuse in childhood. His main goal is to help those looking for resources on sexual abuse of boys and lasting effects of childhood sexual abuse in the lives of men. He helps provide resources for men who were sexually abused in childhood and want to know what professional researchers and therapists have learned. And he wants to provide resources for girlfriends, spouses, partners, friends, and family members of men who were or may have been sexually abused in childhood. Jim Hopper, he's really out there trying to help people, and I like his website, and I'll give you that information. I have the link, but I don't know exactly what I did with it, and it's not on this. I can't see it on this page. What he has these links that you can click on his page that will take you to his homepage. But the thing is if you type in Jim Hopper, so Jim, J-I-M, and then Hopper, H-O-P-P-E-R, it will bring up his stuff. And he is a psychologist, and he works, his field is in the field of abuse and abuse survivor issues, right? So this is a great article. It has lots and lots of further resources and references to material. So I would really hope that people would take a look at his website. And we're going to continue on here and just take a look at it. He says here, 1in6.org, that's also an organization that he's part of. I don't know, it might be something that he founded, I'm not sure. But if you type in 1in6.org, it is specifically set up for men. And it says it is a comprehensive website that I'm creating. Okay, so he did create it for men with histories of unwanted or abusive sexual experiences in childhood, and for people who care about them. Through those still under development, 1in6.org already has lots of great information and resources. So this is what he said here. I've actually been on that website, 1in6.org. It's a great website for the male survivor and for their families and friends and supporters and anyone who really wants to be helpful to a male victim or survivor of child sexual abuse, right? So important that people get that information out there to people. A lot of men might not know it's even there, and it is specifically set up to help men with these issues, and then their supporters, whoever their supporters are. So I just hope everybody will go and check that out. And take a look at it. It's just awesome. And he's this article. He's got all kinds of stuff here regarding understanding the research of how he researched his material. I'm not going to actually go into that. It's very lengthy. It's probably I don't know. Let's see here, probably 3 or 4 pages of just how he got his research. I don't necessarily think that we need to go into that, but you can read that for yourself. But he's got here studies, a review to July 1996, and he says approximately 1 in 6 boys is sexually abused before age 16. And he says, why only to 1996? That's when I conducted a comprehensive review for my master's thesis, and since then I've been much less focused on rates of sexual abuse among males than on how all kinds of abuse can affect men and women. This section will still be useful to people who want to understand how different research methods yield different prevalence statistics. And so this article was actually revised in 2009. So he's actually saying that the information is still good, even though some of the stats might have changed. And so, he goes on to talk about all kinds of his studies that he's done. And that if you want to read about him and about his studies, then I think that's a good place to start. But I like what he's written here. If you continue on through his article online, you can see that he's got possible lasting effects, basic information, and outline. And he talks about the child abuse and the human condition, and it just kind of goes on from there. And I think that's where we're going to start. And it says this section provides some basic information on the complexity of this issue, and then reviews research on long-term effects of childhood sexual abuse in men's lives. At the end of this section, several articles and books are listed, along with the symptoms and other effects, and the complete citations for these articles and books, which you can get from libraries and bookstores. He's also, because he's got a little section for recommended books and articles. And he says, of course, the sexual abuse of male children can lead to a variety of problems and suffering, but it's not that simple. My aim in this section is to provide some basic information that, while conveying the possible effects of the sexual abuse of males, helps people appreciate the complexity of this issue and avoid unnecessarily pessimistic beliefs. He says, therefore, I will start with 4 basic points, and I'm just reading from his page here. Number one, being sexually abused is one of the many painful and potentially damaging experiences that a human being may suffer in childhood. Number 2, whether and to what extent child abuse and neglect or other painful experiences have negative effects depends on a variety of factors related to the abuse itself, but also to relationships in which the abuse and the child's responses occur. Number 3, child abuse in itself does not doom people to lives of horrible suffering. And number 4, if a person has been sexually abused and experiences some of the problems or symptoms listed below, the abuse is not necessarily the primary reason for such suffering. It might not be the only reason why a person is suffering. So he just wants people to know that. And then he goes on to talk about child abuse and the human condition. He says it is important to consider these issues in relation to what some people refer to as the human condition. By this I mean all human beings suffer painful experiences, and some of these occur in childhood. All caregivers of children are sometimes unable to protect them from painful experiences, and we all need love and support to deal with the effects of painful experiences. He also points out everyone must find ways to cope with the emotions generated by painful experiences, whether or not we get love and support from others. And he also points out here many coping or self-regulation strategies work in some ways, but also limit people in other ways. For example, ignoring painful feelings may reduce one's conscious experience of them, but it also prevents one from learning how to manage them in smaller doses, let alone larger ones, which makes one vulnerable to alternating between feeling little or no emotions and being overwhelmed and unable to cope with them. And avoiding getting close to people and trying to hide all of one's pain and vulnerabilities may create a sense of safety. But this approach to relationships leads to a great deal of loneliness, prevents experiences and learning about developing true intimacy and trust, and makes one vulnerable to desperately and naively putting trust in the wrong people and being betrayed again. And at the extreme, getting really drunk can block out painful memories and feelings, including the feeling of being disconnected from others, but cause lots of other problems and disconnections from people. And he says here, some people suffer more painful experiences than others, and abuse is one of many possible causes of extreme emotional pain. Others include life-threatening illness, death of a loved one, physical disfigurement, etc. Some people get more love and support from their families and friends than others, and families in which abuse occurs tend to provide less of the love and support needed to recover from abuse. But families in which abuse does not happen can also experience significant problems and can make it hard for family members to deal with the inevitable painful experiences in life. So this is all true, right? Finally, because everyone needs caring relationships and love, emotional neglect can be more devastating than abuse, particularly in the earliest years of life. So he talks about the effects of child abuse depend on a variety of factors. And he says, we have learned from many people's experiences and a great deal of research that the effects of abuse and neglect depend on a variety of factors. So he's grouped these into groups. And he says here, factors research has shown to influence the effects of abuse. So age of the child when the abuse happened. Younger is usually more damaging, but different effects are associated with different development periods. Who committed the abuse? Effects are generally worse when it was a parent, step-parent, or trusted adult than a stranger. And whether the child told anyone, and if so, the person's response. Doubting, ignoring, blaming, and shaming responses can be extremely damaging, in some cases even more than the abuse itself. And that's true, right? If you have a parent, if you're a survivor of child abuse and you have a parent or caregiver who, you told, especially if it was child sexual abuse, and they don't believe you, and then they start to blame you, and that's more hurtful probably than the abuse itself, because this is someone you're depending on to actually help you and care about you, right? Whether or not violence was involved, and if so, how severe, this is also part of what influences the effects of abuse, and how long the abuse went on. Additional factors that are difficult to research or may differ in significance for different people is whether the abuse involved deliberately humiliating the child, how normal such abuse was in the extended family and local culture, whether the child had loving family members and or knew that someone loved her or him, and whether the child had some good relationships with siblings, friends, teachers, and coaches, and whether the child had relationships in which negative feelings were acceptable and could be expressed and managed safely and constructively. Some of these factors are about how severe the abuse was, and some are about the relational context of the abuse and the child's reactions. Both types of factors are extremely important, it says here. And in summary, it is important to appreciate that these issues are very complex and to be familiar with how abuse and neglect can, depending on a variety of other factors, affect various aspects of a person's life. Keep this in mind as you search the web for information and understanding about the effects of child abuse. So it says here, potential long-term effects of the sexual abuse of males. So this section lists potential but not inevitable lasting effects of the sexual abuse of male children. It should not be read as a laundry list of problems and symptoms that necessarily follow the sexual abuse of males, nor does the presence of any in males with sexual abuse histories necessarily mean that the abuse is the primary cause. So findings on the long-term effects of the child sexual abuse in males have been more consistent than those on prevalence. So methodologies for detecting problems and symptoms that could be outcomes are relatively straightforward, and many studies have utilized standardized measures that are widely accepted in the field. And so he says, first I want to recommend a paper by David Lisak, L-I-S-A-K, Ph.D. This paper contains many powerful quotations from interviews and with male survivors of sexual abuse. Lisak groups the quotations into themes and discusses them with remarkable insight and compassion. And the themes are anger, fear, homosexuality issues, hopelessness, isolation and alienation, legitimacy, loss, masculinity issues, negative childhood peer relations, negative schemas about people, and negative schemas about the self, problems with sexuality, self-blame and guilt, and also shame and humiliation. So one man, he says here, emailed me to share this experience. Reading this Lisak's article was the first time I realized that other people have had the same issues I have. I sat in the library and cried when I read that article. Not the usual reaction to scholarly research, but I'm sure Professor Lisak wouldn't mind. So this was a quote that he used with permission from a male survivor of child sexual abuse, right? So, yeah, many men just don't realize that they're not alone. I'm sure that they know that there are other male survivors out there. It's just that if they don't get to talk to these people, and they don't get to to get some help within a group, then they can probably feel very much alone if they don't reach out and get some help, whether it's a therapist, a counselor, or group support for the male survivors of child sexual abuse, right? It's just so important that, these people, these male survivors would get some help. And that's what I would hope for everybody, right? So it's so important because here he lists here, using standardized measures of symptoms, researchers have found that men who were sexually abused in childhood, whether or not they seek out mental health services, can suffer from these following things, which is anxiety, depression, disassociation, and hostility and anger, impaired relationships, low self-esteem, sexual dysfunction, sleep disturbance, suicidal ideas and behavior. And this kind of goes hand in hand, really, with all the different types of abuse, and whether or not it's a male survivor or a female survivor, boys and girls. You know what I mean? If we're talking, this is the type of stuff that happens to people when they are abused, and this almost kind of covers all types of abuse too. I do a lot of studying on whether it's physical abuse, verbal abuse, psychological abuse, sexual abuse. Doesn't matter. Every survivor sort of can suffer from all these same things, which is anxiety, depression, disassociation, low self-esteem, all of that stuff sort of encompassed really with associated with abuse, right? So that's why, and men, they don't quite often want to come forward, just to talk to somebody and say, hey, look, I was abused as a child sexually, and it's just not something that a man will do, and there are men out there that are getting support, thank God. And there's groups on Facebook as well for survivors. Men are survivors too. There's all kinds of groups out there, 1in6.org. That's just a couple. I actually have more resources really written down, but you can find it just by typing into the browser, into your browser, male survivors of child sexual abuse, and it will bring up all kinds of stuff out there available for men, who have dealt with child sexual abuse, and whether it was their own parents or whether it was someone who groomed them and abused them sexually. This is the whole issue, right? This does happen, 1 in 6. So we know if you're sitting in a room with 6 men, one of you, chances are, will have had some type of child sexual abuse in your lifetime. And that is horrible. So, and see, this just tells you the prevalence of it, right? But do you actually see that many men reaching out? There's a lot more women will tend to reach out, and it's just because it's women's nature to have a friend to talk to and to share experiences, right? Whereas men don't do that. And especially something about, as horrifying and traumatizing as being abused sexually as a child. So it's just as horrifying and traumatizing to a woman or to a girl, you know what I mean? But there's no difference in that. But the whole idea is that women can quite often will gather together to help each other, and men won't. So the men, they're kind of left on their own, and they probably feel like, hey, if I reach out and tell somebody, what are they going to think of me? What are they going to think about what happened, and are they going to think it was my fault, that I should have been able to stop it, or I don't know how a young child could stop somebody from from sexually abusing them, and most times they will not tell anyone, right? I know I told my mom, and she actually believed me, but she told me it was my problem. I was going to have to deal with it, and it was just not her problem, and she was physically abusing me, so, I certainly didn't push it with her because I realized that if I made her angry, she'd probably beat the crap out of me, so I just let it go, and the abuse continued, but she did absolutely nothing to help me. So that's the whole issue. A lot of times, parents, caregivers just don't want to deal with it. They don't want to have to send another family member off to jail, or see, someone have to go to court and go to jail. So they just let it happen, right? And my parents, at that point, had the abuse, the sexual molestation been reported, my parents would have also been up on child abuse charges because my parents both of them were beating on me physically, and there would have been proof because the abuse was pretty much steady throughout the few years that happened. So I'm sure that there would have been some heavy-duty bruises and whatnot that would show up in deep wounds and deep bruises and stuff to my body. So they would have been busted. So that's why, that my mom was like, I'm just not dealing with it, and it's your responsibility, you deal with it. So this can happen. We know it does. And for everybody out there who likes to sit and pretend that child abuse doesn't exist, pull your heads out, out of the sand and start getting involved, because child abuse happens every single day, right? To all kinds of children, unfortunately. 5 children on average die every day at the hands of their caregivers and parents, but that's just the ones that we know about. They do find babies and children buried and put into suitcases and thrown into the rivers, and there's more. It's just that's all that's actually the stats actually show that are actually reported. That children are dying at the hands of their caregivers and parents, and if they don't die, they're just being horrifically abused, and they end up in the hospital due to the abuse-related injuries. And if they don't end up in the hospital, they're just chained up somewhere in the house where the abuse just continues. This is serious, and I hope everybody will get involved. And if you have not been abused as a child, I hope you will spend 5 minutes or so every day looking at the headlines out there regarding child abuse survivors and victims, and think about what it would be like to be in their world, and then get busy and get involved in no matter what way you can to help make a difference for these children and to help stop and prevent child abuse, right? It's so important. We cannot talk enough about it. We cannot do enough about it. We need to stop it now. And just short of putting a video camera in every single person's home and then completely invading their privacy and catching people just in case they do abuse their child, we can remove them. We'd have to remove 1 in 3 girls and 1 in 6 boys. Where are you going to put all these kids? See, this is a huge problem, and we have to do something to stop it, and we really have to get involved. I really hope everybody will get involved, no matter what way it is. Family counseling, get involved, helping families, helping children, just doing something. My God, this is absolutely insane what's happening here, and it needs to stop. It absolutely needs to stop. It's not these children's fault, and it never could be. It's the abuser's fault. So if you're a male survivor out there, and we're going to continue on with this. We're going to go all next week talking about this on my shows, and also on Dreamcatchers Talk Radio with Arnie Alberts on Monday night with Elizabeth Roberts-Brawley and myself with the interview with Arnie Alberts. I hope that you will tune in to some more of my shows if you're a male survivor and you've just never been able to, to feel comfortable enough to coming forward, because we're going to cover more material here, and I'll give you some more resources and whatever I can find regarding this issue. It's so important that you do get help. There are lots and lots of men, sadly, that are survivors of child sexual abuse. It's very sad, I know, but you can get support. There are people out there who deal specifically with male survivors. It's nothing to be ashamed of, and it's not your fault. And so that's the whole issue. Men tend to carry that with them in shame and guilt, and they tend to think that it is their fault, because how could it not be? They should have been able to stop it. There should have been some way for them to not have that happen to them. And, that's sadly, that's what every victim almost feels at some point, is that, well, how come this happened to me? I should have been able to stop it, or, there should have been some way that this wouldn't happen to me. And, it's when you're a young person like that and you're being manipulated and abused, whether it's a parent or whether it's just a child sexual predator, or a pedophile, it's not your fault, and you can't take on that responsibility, and that you can't take on that role. It was they abused you, so they are at fault. It's always the abuser's fault. It's never the child's fault. And so that's one thing is very clear that a person has to get a very clear picture of in their mind and keep it there at all times, to realize that it was not their fault and they did not deserve it, and that there is help out there for them, right? So we have about a minute left, and thank you so much for tuning in, everybody. I have some real prank people coming on my chat show in the chat room, and I wish I could catch them because I could block them. At one point I'll catch them and I'll just block them out and they won't be able to come back in there. So thanks everybody for tuning in. I really appreciate it. And we'll be back on tomorrow morning, One Child Abuse Survivor to Another. That's 6 a.m. and Mountain Standard Time. And also then tomorrow night, Dreamcatchers Talk Radio with Arnie Alberts. I hope you will tune in for that. And then my show will be right after that at 9:30. Child abuse prevention and human rights abuse prevention is up to us, and we'll continue on talking about male survivors of child sexual abuse. And I should have lots and lots more information for you, because I do have more info. I just need to gather it up. And I want to finish looking at this article because we did not finish it. And so we'll go through and we'll look some more at Jim Hopper's article, and I'll get you some more resources and whatnot for Monday night. And so make sure you have a great day, everybody. Take care. If you need anything or I can help you find information, let me know. send me a message on Blog Talk Radio here, or get a hold of me on Facebook. I'll be around, and if you just need a friend, I'm here. And so have a great day. Take care of yourselves. Thanks for tuning in, and be sure and check out Dreamcatchers for Abused Children's website, www.dreamcatchersforabusedchildren.com. I'm the Canada Regional Director for Dreamcatchers for Abused Children, and we have a great website regarding signs and symptoms of abuse and how to report abuse, and if you need help as a survivor, and if you're a parent struggling and thinking you might be abusing your child and that you don't want to. There's all kinds of great information on there for everybody. So please check it out, get involved, and have a great day. We'll talk to you real soon. Bye-bye.